Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. After the drama of the Monaco Grand Prix, confirmation arriving today that Esteban Ocon will not be retained by Alpine for next season. They are officially parting ways. He is gone as of the end of the season. What does this mean for Alpine? Who do they get instead of Ocon? But where does Ocon potentially go, given the friction with teammates that have happened? Everywhere he goes in Formula 1, there is a serious possibility, some people believe, that he will not get a seat at all anywhere on the grid next season. There are still some teams that may be interested, but this genuinely could be it for Ocon's time in the sport. Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Several things to mention first of all, because there's some chaos going on right now. Simone Resta is leaving Ferrari and joining Mercedes as their new strategic development director. This guy's been at Ferrari, been at Haas, back to Ferrari. Now he's going to Mercedes. So of course Ferrari are getting Loic Serra, they're getting Jerome D'Ambrosio from Mercedes, and at least Mercedes are trying to make some statements that they are at least trying to halt the brain drain to some degree. So Resta and James Allison worked at Ferrari, now we're going to work at Mercedes together again. Speaking of Ferrari, they introduced their 2.0 version in Imola, which seems to have made some progress, of course, for them. They now have what they are calling a 2.1 version coming soon. So more big changes, more massive development. And what I found quite fascinating was this article here from AMUS from Toby Gruner discussing some of the changes to this year's cars that have allowed the teams to catch up to Red Bull. One of which is it's not active suspension, it's merely very cleverly designed suspension to maximize the speed of the car. This is something Red Bull had in 2022 that presumably Adrian Newey designed, because we believe he designed their suspension. It has taken 2 whole years for the other teams to figure out how they did it and how to replicate it. But apparently Ferrari's version of this trick is actually even better than Red Bull's, and that creates a very interesting dynamic where it is not guaranteed that Red Bull's concept is actually the best concept in this generation of cars. It seems that way for the last couple of years, but there are certain areas where Ferrari and McLaren have differed from the Red Bull ideas, and arguably in some senses are actually somewhat better, which makes the season rather fascinating. But there are 5 teams that have been able to use this trick. So effectively, when you go to higher and higher speeds, you generate more downforce, obviously, from the wings of the car. What you really want to do is use that downforce to lower the rear of the car naturally, using the suspension trickery to such an extent that you're able to stall the flow of air over the aerodynamic downforce generating elements so that the car stays low, but it actually creates less drag than it otherwise would. And it seems Red Bull invented the way to do this in this era of regulations back in 2022. Other teams have tried to catch up. However, now there are other teams that have done so. Mercedes have done so, not McLaren, interestingly, but apparently it's just Mercedes, Ferrari, and the other 2 teams are those that effectively have just got the same suspension as the other teams. So RB have it because they have the Red Bull stuff. Haas have it as well. So it's like, how do you do fellow top teams, right? Haas is in here with a similar system, but it's taken 2 years for these guys to replicate it. But this I thought was rather fascinating. The one from Ferrari is said to be even better than the original one that Red Bull came up with. So these teams, not McLaren interestingly, but certainly Ferrari and Mercedes, have now a way to increase their straight line speed by stalling some of the downforce generating elements of their car using very clever, it's just the beauty of Formula 1 in many respects. But the fact that somebody is now doing it better than Red Bull is very fascinating, I would say, for the season to come. But let's talk the driver market, because Kimi Antonelli seems almost certain at this point to get the Mercedes drive. They're not going for Sainz, especially because for Sainz, he has to make a decision within the next, few weeks, right? Whereas Mercedes, they've got Antonelli under contract. They can feel free to wait as long as they like. And every single test that Antonelli does, he impresses those guys. Bearman's getting a seat at Haas. Antonelli is getting Hamilton's seat. I'm very convinced of it at this point. And he's got another 3-day Mercedes test coming up this week, effectively, which is probably going to go well, as all the other ones have. Red Bull are set to make an announcement relatively soon. They say stay tuned yesterday. As of today, we don't know what that's actually going to be. It's possibly the Perez re-signing deal, which we're pretty sure is going to be happening at this point. It is unlikely to be Esteban Ocon joining alongside Verstappen, because even if you think Verstappen would crush Ocon, which you more than likely would, why would you bring Ocon into your team knowing his history with other drivers? And that is the question that is raising the argument as to whether he actually ever get to drive in Formula 1 again. So Esteban Ocon today confirmed by the team and by Ocon he is leaving Alpine at the end of the season. Bruno Faman said, after Monaco, after the crash that he had with Pierre Gasly, there will be consequences. And initially, the consequences were thought to have been he was going to get dropped for Canada and probably put in Jack Doohan instead. That is not happening. Ocon will drive in Montreal, but it seems like the consequences were, well, wider reaching than that, and they're just cutting him straight up from the team. Apparently, this was happening anyway. That's what they say, that the plan was to get rid of him and part ways regardless, so now they are doing exactly that as was already intended. But the feeling is that whatever happened in Monaco, even if it wasn't primarily responsible for this, as in the French Civil War was happening, Ocon versus Gasly, it wasn't going very well, and someone had to go. It seems like Alpine were convinced that Ocon was the one that had to go, and this is what I said at the time, that it felt like the Monaco thing a bit of an excuse in some ways to like just ramp up the, removal of Ocon from the team, because yes, Ocon has a history of this stuff, but there's an argument that that specific case is not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but it seems like that push, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. Some sources were saying that it was, I think, Thursday when he was at the factory in Enstone on the simulator that he was informed that his contract was not going to get renewed. So Ocon's gone. Ocon, of course, comes out with a statement saying that, of course, he spent many years with this team, very lucky, privileged, etc., etc. I've crossed paths with so many inspiring individuals, and certainly crossed paths with many individuals in the sport, many teammates in the sport. He says, like, there's a long way to go. I'm dedicated to finishing out the season strong with the team, but is this going to be his last drive in the sport? It's certainly a question that's going around. Joe Soward says that he's leaving. This is nothing to do with what happened in Monaco. So this seems to have already been in the works, but Monaco, of course, certainly didn't help. If you guys didn't see what happens there, this was the incident where this is lap 1. Sainz has got a puncture at this point and is out of the Grand Prix. Now, yes, the red flag happened, and because Joe was so slow through the first sector, weaving through all the debris and the damage, they went back to the starting order. But anyway, at this point in the Grand Prix, for all Gasly and Ocon know, they are running P9, P10. But for some reason, Ocon decides, you know what, we're just going to absolutely send it down the inside here into Portier. And, look, it's a move that it's on. Technically, it's on. But it's just not something that you do against your teammate lap 1 of Monaco when you're both running in the point. And, of course, he gets some understeer coming out of the corner. He squeezes Gasly a bit into the wall. He ends up getting, crunched into the air. And then, boom, off he goes, damages his car, and it's all over for Ocon out of the Grand Prix. Gasly does hold on for a point, but it wasn't ideal. There's therefore talk about where he's going to go next. Lawrence Barretto says no news as to where he may land. I think he also tweeted out, though, that, potentially Haas and some of other teams are interested. Whether they are interested enough is a big question, right? And this is when we've got to talk about what about Ocon as a teammate? Who's going to replace him, obviously, but where might he potentially go? This is his history with teammates, and pretty much every driver that he's been alongside, certainly in the Formula 1 world, we're looking at Sergio Perez, we're looking at the days with Daniel Ricciardo, we're looking at most certainly the Fernando Alonso era of Alpine, obviously Pierre Gasly in recent times. Pretty much whenever he's been alongside another teammate, it's been causing drama. And Ocon is a fast driver. He's not stunningly fast, but he's pretty damn fast. Gasly, I think, did a very good job next to him last season. This season so far, Ocon's been actually doing really well compared to Gasly, at least in qualifying and race results, but they haven't got the points, the car isn't very good. And while Ocon is fast, is he undeniably fast to cover over some of the issues? The amount of times that he's tried to put Fernando Alonso in the wall, or they've come together, or, you watch the Grand Prix and you think, is Ocon happy to get P19 as long as Gasly is P20? Sometimes it feels, I think it was even last year in, was it not Brazil, where the very start of the Grand Prix, he was just really defending against Gasly, and Gasly was behind him saying, Esteban, look forwards rather than trying to defend from me. Like, what are you doing, sunshine, type thing. And I think this was all several things that built up. And as I've said before, in many ways, Ocon's run into Formula 1 coming from nothing, right? His family sacrificing everything to get him to this point. He has a great origin story. He has drama with Gasly back in, of course, the karting days. Certainly the families have drama between them. There's rumours that they're not even allowed to be at the track at the same time because it's going to cause serious problems. So this has been a thing for a long time. But for whatever reason, Ocon just cannot seem to turn off that absolute killer instinct with his teammate whenever he's racing them, and it makes him a liability, right? And as I say, it's not like he's undeniably fast to the extent that you wouldn't think, well, he's like Verstappen level quick And yes, he's a bit controversial and he's going to cause friction, but like, he's so good we have to sign him. Ocon isn't really that guy. There's plenty of other drivers I think that could do as good of a job as Ocon without the baggage. Is he still a Formula 1 level quality driver? Yes, but there are other factors in play. He's not going to go to Red Bull. Like, that is just not going to be happening. There's also, of course, the possibility, does Gasly even stay? That's the other point, because the feeling is that, well, Ocon's going to get replaced. Gasly, I think, will stay. But there have been rumours that at least Gasly, as with Ocon, have been exploring the market. One of the reasons why they might have looked to get rid of Ocon anyway is because we're pretty sure that he was exploring the market recently regardless, and maybe Alpine saw that, weren't so happy about it, right? It is, gotta say, it's kind of incredible, isn't it? How Alpine, not long ago, they had Fernando Alonso, they had Esteban Ocon, they had Oscar Piastri, and they were trying to find a way to fit all three of those guys into 2 seats. The plan was to kick Alonso out and put Piastri in. Obviously, Alonso saw through that and decided to leave of his own volition. Got 8 podiums last year at Aston Martin as a result. Then they were going to put Piastri in the car, and then it was like, without my agreement, they've agreed to put me in the car. Piastri leaves to McLaren after all the drama, and now even the one man they were left with at Esteban Ocon, he's gone as well. So it is an absolute shambles at Alpine, and in many ways, maybe it's not the end of the world for Ocon leaving, but just thinking about the fact that Alain Prost is gone, so many of their individuals on a top level have gone. We've even seen recently other senior staffers have left, and in terms of drivers, Alonso, Piastri, Ocon, they're all now gone. So there's clearly a problem at Alpine. It's classic French Renault politics at the top level, and Luca De Meo and those guys have to make some serious decisions as to what they do with this team going forward. Do they even keep it? Do they sell it to Andretti? Do they turn off the engine project and buy an engine from elsewhere? Who knows? But it's certainly something to at least think about. Obviously, Jack Doohan is a possibility to replace Ocon as well. He is currently their reserve driver. There is talk about Mick Schumacher, but to me, that seems relatively unlikely. So Jack Doohan is certainly a prospect. You've then got to consider Sainz is maybe an outside chance, although there are probably better options out there on the table for him, potentially, but we'll discuss that in just a couple of seconds. There's other drivers, Zhou, potentially free agent, Bottas, obviously, even Kevin Magnussen, these types of guys, and there's other prospects out there as well. But the question is that those drivers I've mentioned, the seats they currently inhabit, could Ocon go there? Of course, he's still kind of a Mercedes man, right? He's managed by Toto Wolff's stable, and that provides some benefits. But it's not like he's going to get that Merc seat, otherwise he probably already would have got it. So I wanted to share what Craig Slater had to say on this, because there's been some mixed opinion, I think, from the journalist. But Slater's opinion, having asked around, is effectively he thinks it's less likely than 50% that Ocon has a seat in F1 next year. He believes in those he talked to that most doors are emphatically closed on Ocon, either because they've got other plans or because they just don't think he's good enough to handle the baggage that he has. Haas is a prospect, and I will say an Ocon-Bearman lineup would be fascinating, because it would be a bit of a trial by fire for Bearman, how he'd get along alongside a fiery teammate like Esteban Ocon, and it wouldn't be a bad lineup at all. But maybe Haas can even do better than that, depending on their prospects, right? Maybe Yuki Tsunoda could be an option. Where's Carlos Sainz going to fit into all this mess? Is he going to go to Williams, right? So there's maybe one team in Haas that has the door potentially open, but apart from that, it's tough to see.
The advice I'm being given is that the relationship between him and the team had come to a natural end. He'd been there for 5 years, which is a long time in Formula One terms. It's difficult for Ocon. Now, he is managed to a degree by Toto Wolff, who's the team boss at Mercedes. But if Wolff wanted to put him in that seat replacing Lewis Hamilton, for example, that would already have happened. That's not going to happen. I've been doing my rounds and finding pretty much that most of the doors seem closed to Esteban Ocon at the moment. But I'd say it's odds against, maybe unfortunately for Esteban Ocon, him keeping a drive in F1 next year, maybe Haas's best chance.
So it's well known that Ocon and Haas have been talking together for some time, but we're pretty sure that Bearman's getting the seat. Magnussen may say, but it's pretty unlikely. So that is probably the best chance for Ocon next year, and it's not it's not a bad seat to take given the circumstances right now. But is he even Haas's number one choice, depending what happens elsewhere in the driver market, right? I think the next domino that's going to fall really is going to be Carlos Sainz. He has to choose. Does he go to, even Alpine is now an option, right? But does he go to Audi? Ferrari, currently Sauber? Does he go to Williams? That's effectively the choice that Sainz has to make, and once he makes up his mind on that, the rest of the dominoes will probably fall into place to some degree. We're pretty sure that RB are going to keep Ricciardo. Whether they keep Yuki, they would like to, but they may not, because he may decide to leave, and that could open the door to Liam Lawson potentially. We'll see what they plan to do over there, but as I'm talking through those names, right, Liam Lawson, throwing these guys into the mix, there just aren't many opportunities for Ocon to go onto the grid. The feeling is that probably the Audi Sauber door is closed, the Williams door is closed, the RB door is probably closed, obviously all the other doors are closed apart from maybe Haas. That is the option, apart from potentially going to race in another category. I think it is genuinely a realistic possibility, given Ocon's tenure and his history with his teammates, that these other teams just aren't interested anymore. They've seen the drama every year with Alonso, with Gasly, and even before that as well with Perez. Like, it's happened again and again and again. It doesn't seem like Ocon's going to change. Even Gasly made this point right after Monaco. He said, look, we know what it's like as racing drivers. We know what's acceptable. We know what isn't. Ocon was over the line, but it doesn't seem like this guy's ever going to change. That was effectively what he basically said. He needs to change. But it's like when it's been, 7 years and he's not changed, then you've got to wonder whether other teams will actually decide to do that. Because if you're Williams, it's like, you don't want the drama involved in that. Yes, he's a kind of a Mercedes man, but do you really want the drama putting Ocon alongside Albon? I don't. If I'm James Vowles and the team, I'd prefer to get somebody else in. But, then again, I guess Sainz is maybe a similar character in some respects. Like, he obviously goes hard on his teammates, but Sainz is probably a better driver than Ocon, right? Straight up. So that means you're going to lean in his favour anyway, even if Ocon is available. So it's an absolute mess. If Ocon doesn't get a seat on the grid next season, does he ever come back? I think that's a question. Still, if the Mercedes links are there, it's maybe possible in the medium to longer term, but it seems unlikely with Antonelli and Russell and, of course, Verstappen really being the top target at Mercedes over the next couple of years. So for Ocon, where next, right? WEC with the Alpine kind of WEC project over in endurance racing. IndyCar is a possibility, following in fellow Frenchman's footsteps, Romain Grosjean, to go over there and bid it in the wall every weekend. Like, maybe Ocon could do that. There's also Formula E as a possibility, right? None of which I'm sure Ocon would like to do, but are options that he may be forced into. And as I say, rumours emerging that Ricciardo is expected to stay with RB into 2025. His seat remains secure. And, as Red Bull progress, it seems to me that the marketing budget and the cash they can generate from their drivers is becoming an increasingly important factor. I think it also shows how, in terms of the power struggle between Helmut Marko and Christian Horner, Horner won hands down, because Horner likes Perez, he likes Ricciardo. Helmut Marko doesn't like Perez, doesn't like Ricciardo, as far as we understand from what he says externally at the very least. So there is a feeling here that Horner is really now consolidated power and calling the shots, and that maybe has a part to play in what exactly happens next. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. I guess the other point is that with the Alpine seat available, is there something there? Could we see a nice little Yuki-Pierre reunion at Alpine? Maybe, but I don't know if that's even the best option for Yuki Tsunoda, given the possibilities out there. And if I was Yuki, I'd be thinking, you know what, maybe I'll just go to Haas. And if I'm Haas, I think I'm taking Yuki over Esteban right now. So massively intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Really interesting how these next few weeks is going to play out. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.